Now today I will explain deficient demand. What is the meaning of deficient demand? Previous class I explained excess demand and what is the effect of excess demand, and also the diagram of excess demand and inflationary gap. Everything I explained in previous class, but today I will explain deficient demand. So what is deficient demand? Deficient demand means when the aggregate demand is less than aggregate supply at the full employment equilibrium level, then this situation is called deficient demand. Deficient demand means decrease in aggregate demand less than aggregate supply. So I have drawn here diagram. So with the help of this diagram I will explain this situation. So here X is measured income, output and employment, and OY is measured aggregate demand. Here aggregate supply is upward rising and aggregate demand is upward rising straight line. So here aggregate demand and aggregate supply intersect at point E. E is the equilibrium point. Here I have written full employment equilibrium E point, and OM equilibrium level of income, output and employment. This situation we have seen from this diagram. Now aggregate demand falls. So here new aggregate demand is AD1. This demand aggregate demand falls. That's why the aggregate demand, new aggregate demand is AD1, and AD1 and AS intersect at point E. So this point will be the equilibrium point, but it is not possible because the equilibrium point is E. So if we assume that aggregate demand is less than aggregate supply, then we have seen here EG, this portion represents deflationary gap. This portion, in this portion the employment decreases, means G point represents involuntary unemployment, because when aggregate demand falls, and then output stock increases, and this situation producers will not produce the new type of quantity, stop production, and also stop the recruitment of the employment. So in this situation unemployment created in the economy when aggregate demand falls. So this gap E and G represent deflationary gap. So what is deflationary gap? Deflationary gap is the gap created when aggregate demand, actual aggregate demand falls short of aggregate demand required. We need aggregate demand in this situation, but here aggregate demand falls. So this portion represent deflationary gap. So now here AD C plus I, component, consumption and investment we know, and here C plus I minus delta I. Delta I means decrease in investment. Decrease in investment, that's why aggregate demand falls and deflationary gap created. So this is known as deficient demand and deflationary gap. Now next, the reasons for deficient demand. Why this deficient demand created in the economy? So now I am going to explain these points.